Qantas agrees it misled passengers and will pay $120 million in fines and reparations for customers. Westpac announces a slump in profits, and it isn't looking promising for Movieland, with cinema seat sales way below pre-COVID and no blockbuster on the horizon to help the industry. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Tuesday, the 7th of May, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, obviously a very big day today because it's Reserve Bank Day, but also it is Newsletter Eve, which is the day before the newsletter. The Fear and Greed weekly newsletter comes out every Wednesday. Head along to fearandgreed.com.au, put your email address in, and you will get the Fear and Greed newsletter when it comes out mid-morning tomorrow, isn't it?
Mid-morning tomorrow, assuming you do your part and I do my part, it'll all go smoothly. What could go wrong, Michael? What could go wrong?
I just can't wait to see what you unleash on tomorrow. Your
Unleash.
opinion. Yes.
I love the way you say unleash. It's sort of, I'm not an unleash sort of guy, let's face it.
Oh, until you get to the newsletter. And all of a sudden. Look, immediately after the show today, you have an interview coming up with Paul Buddha from Buddha Consultancy.
Yes, so it's all about telcos. We've spoken to Paul before. He knows the telecommunications sector inside out. A lot going on there. We talk about Optus's new boss, about the deal between TPG and Optus to provide services in the bush, what's going wrong with Telstra, what's happening with the Telstra 3G network, plenty in it.
Yeah, it is a good chat. Paul certainly knows that space very, very well. It's coming up after the show. The main story, though, this morning, Sean, Qantas has agreed to pay $120 million following a claim brought by the regulator that the national carrier sold tickets for flights that were already cancelled.
The deal means customers on cancelled flights will receive up to $450 in compensation after Qantas admitted is a very important word in this, it had misled passengers. But the total payout is less than initially forecast when the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission launched its legal action against the airline. Qantas will pay between $225 and $450 to 86,000 affected customers. That'll cost them about $20 million. It will also pay a $100 million fine. The ACCC alleged Qantas sold airfares on 8,000 flights that it already knew it had cancelled. Now, Qantas has argued it was selling a bundle of rights to flights rather than an airfare. Try explaining that one in the pub, though. Yesterday, it agreed to the claim of misleading conduct. CEO Vanessa Hudson apologised for the behaviour. Those affected have already been refunded or were booked on alternate flights, but will still receive additional compensation after the airline accepted it failed to notify customers of cancellations within an adequate time period.
Sean, it's not a good look, is it, for a major company, particularly you would say one as kind of prestigious as Qantas, to admit that it did mislead customers. What do you think is behind the deal here with the ACCC?
I agree it's a bad look, but it should end the public relations disaster for Qantas that has pretty much continued ever since the so-called ghost flights discussion emerged. Maybe $120 million is worth it. Now, Ms. Hudson, of course, is a new chief executive officer. She wasn't running the business when it all happened, so she can allow customers and regulators and politicians to blame her predecessor, Alan Joyce, even if she doesn't. Others can. It's part of her efforts to win back customers and favour, and part of a strategy which has included more money for call centres. There's the new loyalty program we spoke about a few weeks ago, better processes when flights are delayed and cancelled. The deal certainly sends a message to other large companies to be wary of what they say. ACCC Chair Gina Gas-Gottlieb yesterday said the deal signals to every large company that the ACCC will hold them accountable to communicate clearly, accurately and honestly with customers. It's a big win for the regulator, even if they didn't quite get what they'd set out to get.
I think you're right, Sean. At least this now kind of leaves all that behind for Qantas. If they had continued to try and argue that point that you said that they were selling a bundle of rights to flights rather than an airfare, the airline just ends up looking tricky then, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the whole problem. It's really difficult to explain that, and I'm sure what they are saying is true, and it's all about management of seats and yields and things like that. But yeah, doesn't pass the pub test.
It certainly doesn't. All right, local markets, how did they perform yesterday?
The S&P/ASX 200 closed up at 0.7% to 7,682 points, with the property sector leading the way, followed by utilities and financials. The Big Four banks did well on the back of Westpac's half-year results. More on that shortly. Both Commonwealth Bank and ANZ ended up more than 1%. Fortescue Metals Group jumped 2.7%, while Wesfarmers, WiseTech Global and Macquarie Group all did well. Among the large caps, those that didn't do quite so well, CSL, Transurban, Woolies, Aristocrat Leisure, REA, Coles and QBE. Best on the day was Pathology Group Helios, while Goodman Group was another strong performer, up more than 4%. Block was worst. In corporate news, Endeavour Group has recorded increases to sales in its retail and hotels divisions. Third quarter retail sales are $2.4 billion, up about 2.5% on the corresponding period last year. Endeavour's share price rose 0.4% yesterday.
Much happening in international markets?
Well, oil steadied after the biggest weekly drop since February as Saudi Arabia hiked selling prices for some grades to Asia for the third month in a row. Basically, it signals confidence in the outlook with the OPEC Plus cartel cutting supply. Gold was also slightly higher. Iron ore still doing pretty well. It's trading just under $120 a tonne. Of course, a week out from the budget. That's of great interest to all Australians. And the Aussie dollar is buying 66.2 US cents.
How do they work that, Sean? Is it just like because obviously the iron ore price is very important, as you say. And do they just kind of factor in an average, a long-term kind of average, a forecast of where it's going in terms of trying to figure out the revenues that will come into the government?
Yeah, that's exactly what they do. It used to be about $60. I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it's like $80 or $90 is what the government had forecast for this financial year. And if it's around that level and is trading at 120, then obviously the royalties from that or the tax take from that will be greater than expected.
All right. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers is starting to suggest that next week's budget might be expansionary, triggering a few fears about its impact on inflation.
Hours after I said Dr. Chalmers was impressing the fact that next Tuesday's budget would not add to inflation, this was yesterday's show, well, he appeared in front of the media and said, the budget isn't time for scorched earth austerity. He said when people are doing it tough, it isn't the time to slash and burn. He went on to warn against simplistic claims about the budget being expansionary or contractionary, saying many measures were designed to reduce inflation. That to me sounds like a man rationalising why he is going to spend more than he takes in. I don't know.
It does sound a little bit like it. And really, you do need to pay a lot of attention to what is said, what is leaked, and what is openly declared by the Treasurer in the lead up to the budget.
Totally.
It's a fairly kind of clear signpost of what to expect.
I mean, it's quite possible that we'll get a budget deficit next week. Most people have thought that we'll get a surplus, but I don't know. He actually came out yesterday and he said the front end, which is presumably the next 12 months, will primarily focus on inflation and latter years on growth. So that kind of flips it again. So you think, well, if they're focusing on inflation in the next 12 months, surely he's not going to have an expansionary budget. Who knows? At the same press conference yesterday, Finance Minister Katie Gallagher said next week's budget will include significant funding of government services to address customer backlogs, modernise digital infrastructure and reduce dependency on expensive outsourced labour. You don't know what that means either, Michael. And earlier in the day, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was impressing that women will be the big winners from the July 1 tax cuts. That's, I'm guessing, because women actually get paid less. Therefore, they will benefit more, but I'm not sure that's something to skite about.
No, I don't think so. Sean, Westpac has announced a 16% fall in its first half earnings to $3.3 billion as competition in the mortgage market hurts profit margins.
The country's third largest bank also announced a 15-cent a share fully franked special dividend on top of its 75 cents a share interim dividend. The bank also lifted its share buyback by $1 billion to $2.5 billion. Now, all that demonstrates that's the extra dividend, the special dividend, the interim dividend, the share buyback, means that Westpac has got plenty of cash and is trying to get that money back into shareholders' hands. With that special dividend, it's probably got excessive franking credits. So all shareholders like franking credits. So they're basically giving the money back to shareholders. The cash profit was slightly better than expected and reflects a drop in its net interest margin, which of course is the difference between what it earns on a loan and pays on a deposit. Also, there were lower than expected bad debts. They did tick up a bit, but not as much as some people forecast. The consumer bank was crunched through competition in the mortgage market, while earnings in the business bank rose. Westpac's share price closed up 2.7% yesterday. Chief Executive Peter King said the economy is on track for a soft landing, though interest rates will remain higher for longer. Now, those comments came as the Reserve Bank board met, two-day meeting yesterday and today. 2:30 today will announce the outcome of its interest rate deliberations, while almost no one is expecting a hike. Former Governor Philip Lowe was in the media yesterday saying there's no guarantee that rates won't rise again because there is still a two-way risk.
Telstra has delayed the shutdown of its 3G network amid concerns it may stop customers across Australia making emergency calls.
The national telco says it will now switch off the network on August 31, 2 months later than planned, to ensure customers have upgraded their devices. About 400,000 devices in Australia are 4G enabled, but still rely on the 3G network to make 000 calls. Federal Communications Minister Michelle Rowland warned customers their device may appear to be operating normally after August. However, if they don't upgrade, customers will find out it isn't working, or could find out it isn't working properly when they make an emergency call. You don't want that. Affected devices include mobile phones, landlines, farm machinery, and medical devices.
And just staying in the telco sector, the boss of the National Broadband Network, Stephen Rue, will take over running Optus.
He replaces former CEO Kelly Bayer Rosmarin, who resigned in November last year following criticism of the way she handled a national network outage and a cyber attack back in 2022. Optus chair Paul O'Sullivan said Mr Rue's experience in setting up the digital backbone of Australia, i.e. the NBN, will benefit the telco group. Mr Rue has been boss of the NBN since 2018. His term was not due to end until late 2026, but he's jumped now. Well, jump in November at least. Chief Financial Officer at the NBN, Philip Knox, will be the acting CEO until a new CEO is appointed. Mr Rue was formerly NBN's Chief Financial Officer and previously worked at News Corp as well.
It's quite a slow motion jump then, isn't it? If it's not till it's like a steady lunge. He's lunging towards Optus.
It's kind of like a 3G jump rather than a 5G jump. It's probably a 2G jump, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very analog jump instead of an NBN
analog
style. Oh, we got a little distracted there. Dry weather conditions have triggered a big downgrade in GrainCorp's profit outlook and a 4% fall in its share price.
The East Coast grain handler said a significant fall in farm production in Australia and stronger global supply of wheat and oilseeds is behind the downgrade. Dry conditions across much of Western Australia's wheat belt region and problems within food manufacturing also added to the downgrade in the outlook. Good harvests in southern New South Wales and Victoria have been offset by below average conditions in Queensland and northern New South Wales. Also, a rebound in wheat exports from Russia, despite international sanctions, has kind of added to that global supply dynamic.
How about this one, Sean? The ASX is inquiring into the sale of $17.4 million worth of share options by the Chief Executive and Chief Financial Officer of Kogan.com in early April, just weeks before the company downgraded its outlook, sending its share price tumbling.
Yeah, so Kogan.com says the poor sales update after the share options were sold wasn't material. Now, once that update was given, the share price actually fell 27%. In letters disclosed to investors yesterday, ASX compliance officials queried the online retailer about the sale of the options held by Chief Executive Ruslan Kogan and Chief Financial Officer David Schaefer. They were sold back to the company on April 4, according to the Financial Review. The options had been issued back in 2020. Now, last month, Kogan said it would allow the two executives to sell the options back to the company. The actual price was somewhere between the original strike price and what the company had been trading at over the previous 20 days. At the time of the April 4 option sale, the stock had soared to $7.90. That's because Kogan.com told investors profit margins and earnings were strong. Then came, a few weeks later, a very poor update. That's after the two had sold their options, and the share price fell 27.5%. That's what the ASX is looking into. I reckon we're going to hear more about this one.
I think you might be right. International news time now, and Mexican authorities have confirmed that the 2 Australian and 1 American tourist who went missing in northern Mexico last week have died after their bodies were identified by their parents.
The bodies of Australian brothers Callum and Jake Robinson, as well as American Carter Road, were found at the bottom of a well in an advanced state of decomposition in Baja California state earlier this week. The three foreigners went missing while on a vacation surfing near the popular tourist town of Ensenada, about 90 minutes south of the US-Mexico border on the Pacific coast. Baja California State Attorney General Elena Andrade told the parents and diplomatic officials that there was total institutional commitment to continue with the investigation of these unfortunate events until those responsible receive the full weight of the law. A very sad story, Michael.
Yeah, very, very tragic. Sean, a bit of a change of pace for our last story. There are fears that there won't be a truly blockbuster movie this northern summer, one that takes in kind of $1 billion or more, with cinema attendance about a third of what it was pre-COVID.
Yeah, so there have been a few hits in the past couple of years. Barbie, Oppenheimer, Avatar, The Way of Water. Didn't really see that. Didn't see Barbie either, for that matter. But really, apart from those three, there hasn't been much more. Now, the latest hopeful, The Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, much of it was filmed in Sydney. It brought in less than $29 million on its first weekend, just past. If no film passes $1 billion this summer, it would be the first time that's happened in almost 2 decades, apart from the COVID-affected 2020. Many experts are blaming streaming services, which took over during COVID and basically haven't let up. The cost of Netflix per month, for example, is about the same as the cost of a ticket to the movies. Of this year's Northern Summer releases, only Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine are expected to be hits, but no one really thinks they're going to make that $1 billion mark.
I went to the movies on the weekend, Sean.
Did you?
I did, because it was May the 4th, which is commonly known as Star Wars Day.
Ah, May the 4th, yes.
Yes, yep. So I went along. There was a special 25th anniversary screening of Star Wars Episode 1, which was the first of the prequels, and it came out in 1999, and now it's 25 years later, so there was a bunch of screenings. So I went along to see that. And
a bunch of nerds at the screenings. The prequel, the prequel's 25 years old.
Yeah. Sean, I have a slight issue with the description of there being a bunch of nerds, because that implies that there was more than one. I couldn't find anyone to go with me.
Well, I'll be.
So I went on my own.
Good on you. Buy 2 ice creams so you didn't look like you're on your own.
Well, this is the thing. I was going into the screening, and I was there getting my popcorn and everything, and I felt compelled almost to lie and say, "Oh yeah, my wife's already in there."
Yeah, but the funny thing is, you would have gone in there, and there would have been a lot of single blokes, single millennials.
There was, and the worst part was there was a family, like a dad with his 2 kids going in, and so I kind of walked as close as I could to them so that other people in the cinema that were already in there didn't see me walking in on my own and think, "Oh, what a loser." Instead, they saw this creepy guy walking in really close to someone else's kids, and I think that's actually worse on balance.
Truly modern family, Michael, a truly modern family.
No, they didn't even know I was there. I was just lurking behind. Oh, God. When I think about it now, I cringe. Anyway, wasn't my finest moment, Sean. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You're speaking today with Paul Buddha from Buddha Consultancy.
All about what's going on in the telecommunications sector. We talk about Telstra, Optus, TPG, all that sort of stuff. Great interview with Paul.
Yeah, it is a really good chat. It is coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is also where you go to sign up for the Fear and Greed newsletter coming out tomorrow morning. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 7th of May, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.